Whether it's fair or not, one of the most widely known features of Hornmaster has always been combat. It's just a different animal altogether versus most, if not all, other gaming systems out there. There are no hit points, no general armor classes, no assumptions on blocking or dodging or feints. No, it's brutal, it's bloody, and it's deadly. So much so that many players find that after an initial combat encounter, it might be often better to try and resolve conflicts in other ways. But, adventurers being adventurers, they often find themselves in terrible situations, and sometimes the only way out of a conflict is with the blade, or bow, or, what have you. This is going to be a 2-video tutorial because I want to do something a little different here. This video will be just a demo of an actual combat with next to no rules explanations. The second part covers the actual tutorial, making this both an introductory and post-educational companion. Firstly, I hate to get all Oreo Speedwagon on y'all, but I heard it from a friend, Walt McAtee with Colestra Productions, who heard it from a friend who gave this little spin on Hornmaster combat versus that in other gaming systems. And I think it went something like this, that in other gaming systems, you lose hit points, but in Hornmaster, you acquire injuries. Now, I heard that, I loved it, and now I'm going to expand on it just a smidge. You see, in many other games, your character has hit points to spend, and we see it all the time. There's some yutz who's just like, oh, I have like 180 hit points. I can go toe to toe with any bad beastie in this environment. I can afford to lose at least 100 hit points before I even begin to worry. Yeah, whatever. That's cute. You know who doesn't think like that? Your character. Conversely, in Hornmaster, you don't spend hit points. You acquire injuries. See, injuries cause problems. They cause complications and death, so they are almost universally things that players seek to avoid. And you know who else thinks like that? Your character. I bring that up because I think it's an important point about role-playing in Hornmaster Cathedral. See, combat is quite consequential, and it's something that I personally think is a bit broken in many other systems, leading a character to take ridiculous amounts of risk that overburdens credulity. Let's go ahead and look at an example combat situation. We're going to see attacks, opposed tests, strikes and armor protection, criticals, graphic injuries, morale checks, being vanquished, and really just all kinds of wild stuff. And frankly, I'm fully expecting it to be a bit of a shock if you've never seen Hornmaster combat before. So if this is your first pass through this video, you're not really expected to get it. And that's okay. That's perfectly fine, if not outright expected. Just take it in. Get a general picture of what's happening, and let's pick it back up on the other side, okay? Now, without further ado, let's jump in, both feet in the middle of the narrative. Stalking through the wilderness, Vikrin searches the ground for Gargoon's spoor. Delwig and Carrick glance around, hoping to see some sign of either where they went or where they might be hiding. Each character has an arrow ready to be drawn and fired in a longbow, or a bolt resting ready in a crossbow. Now, as the GM, I already know that the Gargoon are hiding nearby and have spotted the searching party. So they decide to make their stand here, hiding in the bushes and underbrush, and they're going to ambush this small group of humans. The Gargu-Arak each stick 2 light broad arrows into the ground. The encounter begins once the humans are 100 feet from the Gargoon. Round 1. First, we check alertness to figure out who is aware of whom. The Gargoon are all aware of the people coming their way. Now, the party, even though its members are looking, doesn't know the Gargoon are nearby, so all PCs are considered unaware. In fact, the players don't even know that combat has actually already begun. Next, we look at initiatives, and then we're going to rank everyone by initiative. So Delwick becomes first in the order, then the Gargu Kanu, then Vikrund, the Gargu Arak, and lastly, Carrick. After that, we look at engagements. Now, clearly no one's engaged with anybody yet. The PCs don't even have engagement zones yet because they're unaware of any danger. The Gargoon, though, ready for combat and fully aware, they all have EZs of 5, for what it's worth. Now, for actions. Delwick starts. So I ask Delwick's player what she's doing without indicating combat has begun. She continues to search around. I have her test awareness because I want to know if she detects the Gargoon. She rolls a 98 versus an awareness EML of 60, which fails. Meanwhile, I test stealth with an EML of 50, and I roll a 29, a success. So Delwig remains unaware, and therefore so does the party, right? Because she can't warn them. Thus, the Gargoon remain undetected. The Gargu Kanu readies an attack action, delaying it until just before his companions attack, and so I adjust his initiative accordingly. Vikrund tracks. His player tests tracking, rolling 19 against an EML of 56 for a success, and giving him an SV5. That means he can spot one spore trails, which in fact he does. So he's able to confirm the Gargoon have come this way. Now, the Gargu Kanu rises up and takes a shot at Delwig. To do this, he takes the attack action. He selects the shoot missile attack action at Delwig, using his small bow and a light broad-headed arrow. The range is 100 feet, making the attack with his small bow a direct attack. Now, even though she's technically moving, any target moving at a half move or less is generally considered a still target. With archery EML of 44, I roll a 73 and fail. So the arrow whizzes past Delwig, and everyone notices it. Now, none of the party are unaware. So that single miss is enough to give the players reaction rolls by testing initiative. Delwig rolls a 20 against initiative EML of 60. That's a success, meaning she's now aware. Vikrund rolls a 68 against initiative EML of 56. That's a fail, so although he's not unaware anymore, he's now confused. Carrick rolls a 91 against initiative EML of 33. That's also a fail, so he too is confused. At this time, all of the Gargu Arak will stand up and take shots at the humans. Gargu Arak 1 takes the attack action. He selects the shoot missile attack action at Vikrund using the small bow and a light broad-headed arrow. The range is 100 feet, making the attack direct. Vikrund is considered still. So with archery EML of 52, I roll a 27 and succeed. Since Vikrund is a still target, Gargu Arak 1 gets a precision tactical advantage. So Vikrund is going to get hit with an arrow. We now just have to figure out where. I roll a zone die and a location die at the same time, and then a second zone die because of the precision tactical advantage. So the zones come up as 3, the left arm, and 8, the right leg, and a location of 4 would give me either the left upper arm or the right thigh. Now I like the idea of a possible stumble mishap coming up here for the tracker, so I pick the right thigh. Once we know where the strike occurs, we need to know how bad it's going to be. I roll a 2 for the light arrow's impact. I add 3 for the small bow's impact modifier for a strike impact of 5 piercing damage. Now looking over at the armor on Vikrund's leg, we see the cloth there offers no protection against piercing strikes, so effective impact is the full 5p. Vikrant suffers a serious 2 injury to the right thigh, which he notes on his injury profile as an S2P. The broad arrow head doesn't strike hard enough to cause life-threatening amounts of blood loss. So in other words, the wound isn't a bleeder. It also isn't serious enough for the arrow to be considered impaled in the wound. It's certainly sticking out in there, okay? It's just not deep enough to require surgery to remove later. Next, we have to see if this is enough to knock Vikrant out of the fight. His player tests shock and rolls 18 against an EML of 64 for success. The location shock of 3 for the thigh, with injury shock of 2, and no shock modifier from the roll, that gives us a shock index of 5, which corresponds to no shock state. So what that means is, thankfully for the party, Vikrant may still be up and ready for the fight, despite getting shot in the leg with an arrow. The serious leg wound means he's going to suffer a 10-point penalty to impaired tests involving the right leg and movement. But we ain't done yet with old Vikrant, because he just took a serious wound to the leg. So that means Vikrant's player has to make a stumble roll. The whole reason I chose the leg instead of the arm, remember? His agility EML is 75, but now minus the 10 for the impairment, making it 65. He rolls an 80 against this, a failure, which means Vikrant now falls prone. Garguarak 2 takes the attack action. He also selects the shoot missile attack action at Vikrant with a small bow and a light broad arrow. The range is direct, Vikrant is still. I roll a 35 against archery 52 for a critical success. So Garguarak 2 gets a strike, a tactical advantage for the critical, and the precision TA for Vikrant being still. So I roll 2 zone dice for precision and a location die. I get zones 1 and 8, the head, and the right leg again, and location 3 will be either the skull or the right thigh again. Now, I could pick that thigh and really screw it up, but instead, I'm going to go for the headshot. And I tell you what, it ain't looking too good for the old Vic. I roll a 5 for the light arrow, add 3 for the small bow, and I'm going to use that TA for an additional impact of 4P. So this gives a strike impact of 12 piercing. Now Vikrant's leather cap reduces piercing impact by 1, so effective impact is 11P, which is still enough for a serious 3 to the skull, and the arrow is impaled. Yep, that baby's just sticking right out his head like a big old wooden antenna. Vikrant's player notes S3 impaled on the injury sheet. So let's see what this does. His player rolls a shock roll of 1. So, without even referencing the shock EML, it's a success. Now with location shock of 5 for the skull, injury shock of 3, and no modification for the shock roll, we have a shock index of 8. And that's a status of incapacitated. So Vikrant, he's going to remain prone, but now he's unaware again and can no longer act without assistance until he recovers on a shock reroll. For now, just for now, he's considered vanquished. With a serious injury to the head, Vikrant will have a 10-point penalty to all impaired tests and movement. Garguarak 3 takes the attack action, and he does all the same things except now it's at Carrick. He shoots at Carrick with a small bow using a light broad arrow. It's direct. Carrick is still. I roll a 96 against an archery of 52 for a fail. That was quick. And Garguarak 4 does the exact same thing, shooting at Carrick with a small bow and a light broad arrow. Direct. Still. Now I roll a 54 against archery 52. Another fail. For Carrick's turn, he's got to pass since he's confused. His player gets to make a reaction roll, rolling a 22 against an initiative of 33. So now he's aware. Round 2. Everyone is now aware except Vikrant, and that's because of his incapacitation. The Gargu Kanu continues in the same order from the previous round, because remember, he delayed in order to shoot with his companions. And other than that, the initiative ranks continue unchanged. Delwig and Carrick now have EZs of 5 feet, and that's because they became aware. Vikrand, on the other hand, he still doesn't have an EZ because he's still unaware. And no one is engaged with anyone else. Now for the action phase. Delwig takes the attack action. So she first is going to take a free half move of 30 feet towards the Gargu Kanu. But then she's going to shoot at Gargu Arak 1 with her longbow and a heavy bodkin arrow. Now she's at a range of 70 feet from her target, and because she's got the longbow, she's in direct point-blank range. That's a 10-point bonus to her archery EML. But Delwig is moving, giving a 10-point penalty to archery EML too. So these two are a wash. Her target is still. Her player rolls a 39 against archery 52 for success, so she gets a strike with precision. She rolls 2 zone dice and a location die, and she gets 2 2s for the zone, the head and arms area. Now, location is 9, the lower arm. But because the precision produced identical zones, and we kind of look at that as, well, we kind of might have wasted a precision roll, right? That gets bumped down to an extra location die. So her player rerolls a location die, and she gets a 3, the neck. And that's what she selects. Delwig's player now rolls 8 for the heavy arrow, gets 1 for her bow, and 2 more for point blank. This gives a strike of 11p. The bodkin arrows ignore up to the first 4 points of piercing armor protection. And with an armor value of 1 on the neck against piercing, this guy's protection is completely ignored. Gargu Arak 1 takes the full 11p in the neck. That's a serious 3 wound, and it's impaled. I roll a 61 versus shock 50. That's a fail. Location shock of 5, 3 for the injury, 1 for the failed shock test, gives us shock 9, unconscious. Gargu Arak 1 is vanquished. For Vikrand's turn, he is incapacitated and cannot act. His player has to make a shock reroll, though, for his condition. And because he's incapacitated, instead of shock 64, like before, his EML is now 44. He rolls a 63. It's a fail. So Vikrand enters extended shock. That means he's most likely out for the rest of the fight. The Gargu Kanu drops his small bow and gropes for his mang. Gargu Arak 1 is unconscious. Gargu Arak 2 takes a free action to grab an arrow from the ground and load it. He then takes the attack action, shooting at Delwig with a small bow and a light broad arrow. At 70 feet, Delwig remains in direct range for the small bow, not quite close enough for point blank. Since she only made a half move, Delwig is considered a still target. I roll 82 against archery 52 for a fail. Jeez. Gargu Arak 3 also copycats that all the way. Free action to grab and load, shoots at Delwig, small bow, light broad arrow, it's direct range, still target. I roll a 66, of course, against 52 for a fail. Gargu Arak 4 does all that the same too, this time at Carrick. Carrick's range, direct, his movement, still. Now I roll an 18 against archery 52 for success. I get a strike, the precision TA for a still target. I roll zones 3 and 2, different numbers, but both for the same zone, left arm. And a location of 3, the left shoulder. I get to use that precision for an extra location now, because it's the same zone. And that location rolls a 4, the left upper arm. I'm going to pick the shoulder since the armor values look the same between the two, but the shoulder has a higher location shock value. I roll a stinking 1 on the arrow's impact die, adding 3p for the bow for a strike impact of 4p. Now, Carrick's location armor against piercing reduces this by 2 for an effective impact of 2p. This is a minor 1 or M1 wound with no bleeding, no impalement. The thing's probably not even sticking in his arm. Carrick's player rolls a 55 for his shock roll against an EML of 45. That's a critical failure. So even though that's a location shock of 3, injury shock of 1, and now a shock roll modifier of 2 for the critical failure, it still gives a shock 6, no state of shock. However, this critical failure on the roll means Carrick now suffers a 5-point penalty to impaired tests that use that left arm. Carrick attacks. He shoots at Gargorak 2 with his wooden crossbow and a heavy bodkin bolt. But first, he opts to take that half move to get 30 feet closer to the Gargu Kanu. Now his target, Gargorak 2, is 70 feet away, making the attack direct, point blank, and given a 10-point bonus. But this is cancelled by his 10-point penalty for moving. The target is still. Carrick has an M1 on his left arm, so he's going to suffer a 5-point impairment penalty on his archery EML. Carrick's player rolls a 34 against an archery of 34, which is a success. He rolls zones 6 and 2, the legs or the head and arms, and location 2 means the right upper leg or the head. Well, Carrick opts to strike the head. The bolt impact is 12. Add 3p for the crossbow and 2 more for point blank range for a strike of 17p. The 1 point of protection is ignored by the bodkin bolt, making the effective impact the full 17p. A grievous 4 wound, impaled, and bleeding. I roll an 83 against shock 50 for a fail. That's head shock of 5, 4 for the injury, 1 for the failed roll, gives us shock 10, KIA, and thus vanquished. Round 3. Now, we don't need to worry about any changes to alertness, initiative, and engagement zones for anyone who can participate. Everyone else is either in extended shock, unconscious, or dead. So for round 3's actions, we go to the top of the order. Delwig drops her bow and uses the grope action to retrieve her battle axe, wielding it two-handed, reducing the heft to 12. Vikrund is laying down, staring at the tree canopies, breathing heavily and oblivious to all. He is miraculously still alive, for now, with arrows sticking out of his leg and head. The Gargu Kanu takes a double move for 70 feet, and he now engages and threatens Delwig, so she threatens him right back. He accrues 5 fatigue and makes an endurance secondary roll to offset this. He rolls a 4 against a target number of 6 for success, and thus accrues no fatigue in the end. Gargorak 1 remains unconscious. Gargorak 2 remains dead. Gargorak 3 drops his bow and takes the grope action to arm himself with his Mankar. Gargorak 4 does the same. Carrick drops his crossbow, draws the short sword from its sheath as a free action, and makes a grope for his round shield. Round 4. With the only change being that Delwig and the Gargu Kanu are now engaged in threatening each other. Oh my god, they're engaged. It's so adorable. We're ready to go right back to the action. Delwig attacks the Gargu Kanu with the edged aspect of her battle axe, using it two-handed and aiming for the default zone number 1. For defense, I announce a counter-strike from the Gargu Kanu, using the edge aspect of the Mang, using his standard aim zone of 2, because he's shorter. Delwig has 5 encumbrance, but the Gargu Kanu has a 5-point reach penalty due to his smaller size. Delwig's player rolls 45 against her battle axe attack EML of 70. That's a critical success. I roll an 88 against the Gargu Kanu's Mang defense EML of 45 for a fail. That's a strike and a tactical advantage for Delwig. Delwig's player rolls Zone 3, the torso, and Location 9, the pelvis. She rolls an impact of 8, adds 8 edge for swinging her axe two-handed, then adds 2 more for strength. She chooses to use her tactical advantage for additional impact of 6. So strike impact is 24 edged. Now, effective impact reduces this by 4 for the Gargo Kanu's armor at the pelvis against edge weapons, but it's still a 20E, a grievous 5 bleeding wound. I roll a 51 against shock 65 for success, but that doesn't matter because it's a base shock of 4 plus 5 for the wound. That gives the Gargo Kanu shock 9, unconscious and vanquished. Now, it may not matter, but even if he wasn't unconscious, he wouldn't be able to do anything because the grievous wound to the torso is going to render that area of the body unusable for all impaired tests and movement. The Gargo Kanu is now unaware and can't do anything. With 3 allies down, the remaining Gargo-Arak make an immediate morale roll. Gargo-Arak 3 rolls a 66 against Initiative 50, which is a fail, so his morale is set to withdrawing. Gargo-Arak 4 rolls a 30 against Initiative 50, which is a critical success. Not only is he standing in the fight, he actually kind of gets bolstered by this. His morale is set to brave. Delwig ends her turn by barging towards Gargo-Arak 4 for 15 feet. Vikrand is still in extended shock, so he can't do anything. The Gargo Kanu is unconscious, so is Gargo-Arak 1. Gargo-Arak 2, still dead. Gargo-Arak 3 begins to withdraw, but I'm only going to have him withdraw at a half move because he's kind of looking over at his companion, Gargo-Arak 4, wanting to know what he's going to do. So he moves 20 feet, putting him 90 feet away from the humans. Gargo-Arak 4 uses a free action for a rally roll to steady his companion. I roll a 15 against Command Initiative 35, a critical success. This steadies Gargo-Arak 3, who can now return to the fight. After that, Gargo-Arak 4 still has his turn to take, so he takes a full move towards Delwig, but I'm only going to move him 35 feet. Carrick takes a move action for a full move, and he goes the remaining 35 feet between he and Gargo-Arak 4 to engage him and threaten him. Now, obviously, Gargo-Arak 4 threatens right back. Round 5. Taking a look at how things stand at the start of round 5, Gargo-Arak 4 is like a madman, and Gargo-Arak 3 is just barely inspired enough to kind of back up his absolute nutballs frenzied companion. There's nothing to change on alertness, nothing to change on initiative ranks and EZs that haven't been taken care of already. So with that, let's go for the action. Delwig charges Gargo-Arak 4. She takes a half move to go 20 feet to then engage Gargo-Arak 4 and threaten him. He's now engaged with both humans. She attacks with her battle axe, two-handed and edged, zone 1. Gargo-Arak 4 counterstrikes with his Mancar, edged, zone 4. Gargo-Arak 4 has a 10-point penalty for being outnumbered by 1, a 15-point reach penalty, and then an additional 5-point penalty for defending with the Mancar. Delwig tests melee of 70, and a 43 succeeds. With a melee of 60, Gargo-Arak 4 tests an EML of 30 after all those penalties. He rolls 35, a critical fail. Now look at that. If it wasn't for Carrick getting in to double team him, that would have been a critical success. Instead, it's a critical fail. That's a 2-star victory for Delwig, a strike and a tactical advantage. She rolls zone and location dice. She gets 3, the torso, and 4, the thorax. She rolls 2 on her damage, plus 8 for the two-handed, 2 for the strength. That gives us a strike of 12 edge so far. Delwig chooses to hold that TA for now. So with a strike of 12E, we reduce this by 4 for the cloth tunic and cloth vest, and the effective impact is 8E, and S2 to the thorax. Gargorak 4 makes a shock roll against EML 50. He rolls a 25, a critical success. With a location shock of 4, 2 for the injury, but take back 1 for the critical success on the roll, and he has a shock 5, no shock state. He's going to suffer a 10-point penalty to all impaired tests and movement due to the serious wound on the torso. But wait, there's more! Surviving the serious injury, Gargorak 4 must make an immediate morale test. Yet he's a brave little SOB, so he gets a 20-point bonus on his test. With an initiative of 50, he tests an EML of 70, and he rolls a 2. This vicious little monkey just grits his teeth and takes it. He glances up at Delwig through the pane, with hate in his eyes. But wait, there's even more. Now Delwig still has that other TA laying around, and she's going to spend it on an additional melee attack. So, let's do it all over again. Delwig attacks with the same conditions. Gargorak 4 has to dodge. Delwig's melee, still at 70. Gargorak 4, he's got a dodge of 55. It's reduced by 10 because he's outnumbered by 1, and by another 10 due to the impairment. This gives him a dodge of 35. Delwig rolls a 52 for success. Gargorak 4 rolls a 19, also for a success. Now that's a tie, but we can't have that. So for ties with dodge, high roll wins, so Delwig earns a 1-star success. Of course she does. She rolls the zone and location dice and gets zone 3, the torso, and 5, the abdomen. She rolls 5 for the battle axe, adds 8 for two-handedness, and 2 more for strength, for a total strike of 15E. The armor on the abdomen reduces this by 4 for an effective impact of 11E, a serious 3, and a bleeding wound. Gargorak 4 rolls a 96 on the shock roll, which fails. So a location of 4, injury of 3, and shock roll modifier of 1 gives us shock 8. Gargorak 4 is now incapacitated. Now he has a 20-point penalty on impaired tests and movement. Jeez. But we ain't done yet. Seeing his companion go down, and being the last one standing, Gargorak 3 makes another immediate reaction roll. He rolls 61 and rightly fails, and is reset back to withdrawing. Gargorak 3 then makes a double move of 80 feet, fleeing the scene. He's just getting the hell out of there. The double move gives him 5 fatigue, and he tries to offset that with the endurance secondary roll. He rolls a 3 against a target number of 5, so he's able to hoof it without any fatigue this time. Carrick considers pursuit, but given Vikram's condition, he decides to let the remaining Gargorak flee. Just let him go. Instead, he seeks to turn and strike down Gargorak 4 with his short sword, piercing Zone 1. Gargorak 4 is forced to ignore the attack, given his incapacitation. So Carrick has a melee of 64, he rolls 33, a success, and gains a strike and 2 tactical advantages. The zone and location dice give us 4, the torso, and 3, the thorax again. Carrick's player rolls a whopping 2, adds 1 for the short sword, and 2 for strength, and he decides to burn both of his TAs on additional impact of 4 each. That gives a strike impact of 13p. Gargorak 4's armor reduces this by 1, so at 12p, it's still a serious 3. Now there's already an S2 at that site, right? This means this little guy's got a total of 5 injury levels on the thorax. So Carrick is going to roll a d10 against that target number of 5 to see if he gave a compound injury. And a roll of 4 means that I increase the serious 3 to a grievous 4, which is now a bleeding wound. The shock roll is 38, a success, but even still, that's a shock of 8 with a state of incapacitated. And because he's already incapacitated, that downgrades him to unconscious. And frankly, with all the bleeding going on, that's going to get downgraded to dead in short order. With the last combatant padding double time into the wilderness, Carrick and Delwig quickly turned to Vikrund, tending to his wounds and his state of shock. Well, how you feeling there, Puddin'? I mean, wow. What the hell was that, right? Now, Jiminy Crickets. Like, don't get me wrong. I truly believe that if your immediate reaction after that, confusion aside, isn't, I don't know what the hell just happened, but that looked really cool. Bro, do you even have a pulse? There's dice flying, bunches of skills being used, opposed rolls, defenders defending, and status changes. There's armor values, shock states, charges and barges, graphic violence, different types of defeat. Let's face it, there was a lot going on. More importantly, we didn't see these vague yawn-fest sequences of roll, hit, damage, roll, hit, damage, roll, hit, damage, all the while whittling away at seemingly meaningless, ambiguous hit points. Instead, we have a very graphical depiction of what just happened. And even the minor wound on Vikrund. We got a sense of even a seeming scratch was enough to make him less likely to hit his target with a crossbow. But as I said earlier, it's not just understandable. I'd say it's normal to look at what we just showed you and think, dude, that's a lot. The goal here then, remember, is that you'll spill over from this into the combat tutorial and at least form an understanding of the basics of combat in Harnmaster Cathera. Then you can come back and watch the scenario again, and what you're going to see is, that time, it's going to make a good deal more sense. So at this point, if you're still just perusing, that's fine. Keep watching the tutorials, and even give Mind Your Manners a watch for some in-depth interviews on the Harnmaster Cathera system. Alternatively, if you think you're ready to give HMK a shot, you can grab the rules over at Calestia.com, maybe even get you a printed copy to boot. Join the Discord server and start looking for people to play with. And with that, my friends, seek ye the combat tutorial, or any of my other tutorials.